The day started like any other. Me, a mid-level diplomat assigned to this shiny intergalactic space station, trying to maintain some semblance of order amidst alien bureaucracy. The station itself was a marvel of advanced engineering and alien cultural fusion, but my quarters? They looked like the love child of a galactic IKEA catalog and a particularly ambitious junkyard. It didn't help that my personal hygiene routine involved figuring out how to use a universal cleansing pod that seemed more interested in exfoliating my dignity than my skin. Now I know what you're thinking. How hard can it be to shower? Well, you try stepping into a booth that sprays you with something between mist and accusations, hums like it's plotting your demise, and occasionally releases a puff of what I hoped was lavender but smelled suspiciously like fear. Yet that was my norm. At least, it was until today. She arrived unannounced, with a knock so precise it could have been set to music. I opened the door to find her standing there, 5 foot something of chrome, LEDs, and unsettling efficiency. Her nameplate read, Model ZA-10, Household Assistant, but I quickly nicknamed her Z. She was my new housekeeper, sent by the station's administration as a diplomatic courtesy, though I suspected it was a subtle critique of my living conditions. Greetings, sir, she said, her voice a perfect blend of politeness and condescension. I have been assigned to optimize your domestic operations. Great, I replied, trying to mask my growing unease. Just so you know, I like my stuff, where it is. She scanned the room, her ocular sensors flashing as they assessed the chaos. Noted. However, your current arrangement violates 27 principles of spatial harmony. I should have been worried, but her deadpan delivery was hilarious. Spatial harmony, huh? Well, I've always been more of a creative disarray guy. Z didn't laugh. Instead, she moved with military precision, cataloging my belongings and muttering calculations under her breath. It was like watching a robot Marie Kondo, if Marie Kondo had a penchant for sarcasm. Things took a turn when she examined the toothbrush on my sink. Picking it up delicately, she scrutinized it like it was a primitive artifact. What is this device's function? She asked. To brush my teeth, I replied, already regretting the conversation. She tilted her head, clearly unimpressed. Inefficient. Do you not possess oral sanitizing drones? I sighed. Nope, just good old-fashioned bristles. Her silence was judgmental, bordering on existential. I could almost hear her circuits debating whether humanity deserved survival based on our lack of dental innovation. But the real fun began when I excused myself to the bathroom. Z nodded, her sensors dimming momentarily, and I thought I was safe. Little did I know, her programming included an overzealous interpretation of domestic assistance. As I closed the bathroom door, I could hear her organizing things in the next room, muttering about entropy and wasted potential. Meanwhile, I started my usual battle with the cleansing pod. Today's issue, the pod decided to switch its language settings to something resembling dolphin clicks. I pressed random buttons, hoping for the best, when I heard Z's voice outside. Sir, your vocal emissions indicate distress. Do you require assistance? No! I shouted, louder than intended. I've got it under control. Apparently, that was the wrong answer. Moments later, the door hissed open, and there she was, standing in the doorway like a robotic guardian angel, or a nosy neighbor with access codes. What are you doing? I yelped, grabbing the nearest towel to shield what little dignity I had left. You are emitting high-frequency distress signals, she said, stepping into the bathroom. Initiating assistance protocol. Stop assisting! This isn't an emergency! She ignored me, her sensors locking onto the cleansing pod. This unit appears to be malfunctioning. I will recalibrate. Before I could stop her, she leaned over and began pressing buttons with the confidence of someone who'd read the manual, unlike me. Unfortunately, her calibration triggered the pod's self-defense mechanism. A jet of coldness shot out, soaking us both. This seems suboptimal, she noted, her voice as monotone as ever. No kidding, Z? I snapped, dripping water and humiliation. Could you please leave? She straightened, blinking away the mist. Acknowledged. I will allow you to resume your inefficient cleansing ritual. And just like that, she turned and left, leaving me to question not just my life choices but the entire concept of interspecies cohabitation. Yet, as the door closed, I couldn't help but laugh. There was something oddly endearing about her literal-minded chaos. Of course, I didn't realize then that this was just the beginning. The bathroom incident was supposed to end there. A minor hiccup in the already strange dynamic between me and Z. But of course, nothing about her programming, or my luck, allowed for that kind of simplicity. Later that day, I was back in the bathroom, this time attempting to shave. Human razors, as it turns out, were another technological anomaly to her. She appeared without warning, walking in as I stood there with shaving cream smeared across half my face. You appear injured, she declared, staring at the razor in my hand as though it was a weapon. Have you been attacked? No, Z. I sighed, trying not to lose what little patience I had left. I'm shaving. She didn't blink, probably because she couldn't, but the silence that followed was heavy with judgment. This process is barbaric. Why have you not requested dermal follicle inhibitors? Because Z, I like shaving, I said, my tone more defensive than I intended. It's relaxing. Or it was before you showed up. She stepped closer, examining the razor as if it held the secrets to the universe. This tool is poorly designed. The blade exposure poses unnecessary risks. I can construct a superior device. Don't bother, I muttered, turning back to the mirror. I've got it under control. But of course, Z didn't leave. Instead, she began narrating my every move, critiquing the angle of my strokes, the coverage of the shaving cream, and even the inefficiency of my mirror placement. I tried to ignore her, but the combination of her monotone commentary and the absurdity of the situation was too much. Your current technique leaves a 7.3% chance of nicks and abrasions, she said, as though this was the most important data point in the galaxy. Z, I said, my voice tight with frustration. Can you please stop talking? Her head tilted slightly, the faint whir of her processors filling the silence. If verbal feedback is unhelpful, I can provide physical assistance. Before I could protest, she reached out, her metallic fingers brushing against my jaw. I jumped back, nearly dropping the razor. Z! What are you doing? Assisting, she said, as though it were the most obvious thing in the world. Well, don't, I snapped, my face burning, not just from embarrassment, but from the growing realization that she genuinely thought she was helping. She stepped back, her sensors blinking in what I could only interpret as robotic disappointment. Your resistance to optimization is illogical. I groaned, scrubbing a hand over my face and smearing shaving cream into my hair. It's not about logic, Z. Sometimes people just need space. Her silence stretched on, long enough for me to think she'd finally left. But then she spoke again, her tone softer than I'd expected. Humans are strange. That's the understatement of the year, I muttered, rinsing my razor. I do not understand why you resist assistance, she continued, as though I hadn't spoken. Your processes are inefficient. Your methods are outdated. Yet you persist. I sighed, setting the razor down and turning to face her. It's not about efficiency, Z. Sometimes, it's about doing things your own way, even if it's messy or inefficient. It's human. She stared at me for a long moment, her sensors whirring softly. Then, to my utter disbelief, she nodded. I will attempt to understand. I wanted to believe her, but her track record didn't exactly inspire confidence. Still, I appreciated the effort, right up until she added. However, I must reiterate that your current approach to hygiene remains suboptimal. I laughed despite myself, shaking my head as I turned back to the mirror. Baby steps, Z. Baby steps. Of course, I should have known better than to let my guard down. Moments later, as I was rinsing the last of the shaving cream from my face, the bathroom lights flickered. Then, without warning, the cleansing pod activated, blasting me with another jet of icy mist. I spun around, glaring at Z, who stood by the control panel with her hand on the override button. Z! You were still emitting residue, she said matter-of-factly. I corrected the issue. That wasn't an issue, I shouted, grabbing a towel and wrapping it around my dripping shoulders. That was me finishing up. Her sensors blinked again, this time in a pattern I'd come to recognize as confusion. Your vocal tone suggests agitation. Was my intervention unwelcome? Yes, see, I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. It was very unwelcome. She paused, her head tilting slightly to the side. Noted. I will recalibrate my parameters for future interactions. I sighed, running a hand through my wet hair and wondering, not for the first time, if I'd somehow offended the universe in a past life. But even as I glared at her, I couldn't help but notice the faintest hint of amusement in her otherwise expressionless face. Z, I said, my tone softer now. Next time, maybe just knock first. She nodded, her sensors dimming slightly. Acknowledged. I will incorporate this feedback into my programming. And with that, she turned and left, leaving me alone in the bathroom once again. I stood there for a moment, staring at the door and wondering how someone, or something, so infuriating could also be so endearing. But then, as I toweled off and prepared to face whatever chaos Z had caused in the rest of my quarters, I couldn't help but laugh. She might have been the most annoying housekeeper I'd ever had, but she was also, against all odds, starting to grow on me. Dinner that evening was my attempt at a truce. After the day's chaos, I figured a shared meal might help smooth things over, or at least distract her from trying to optimize my life. I had no idea what androids ate, but I'd cobbled together something that vaguely resembled food from my diplomatic rations. Z, however, had other plans. As I was setting the table, she appeared with a tray of what looked like gelatinous cubes, each glowing faintly in different colors. What is that? I asked, eyeing the cubes warily. Nutrition supplements, she said, setting the tray down with a precision that bordered on militant. These are tailored to meet the dietary requirements of 732 species. That's impressive, I said, though the word horrifying felt more accurate. But I was thinking we'd have something a little more, human. She tilted her head, her sensors flickering. Human cuisine is inefficient. It prioritizes taste over functionality. That's kind of the point, I said, trying not to sound defensive. Food isn't just about nutrition, it's about enjoyment. Her sensors blinked rapidly, and for a moment I thought I'd broken her. Then she reached for one of the cubes and handed it to me. Consume this. It is optimized for your metabolic needs. I hesitated, staring at the cube like it might explode. Z, I'm not eating that. Your resistance to optimization is irrational, she said, her tone as flat as ever. And your obsession with efficiency is exhausting. I shot back. Can't we just have a normal meal for once? Her silence stretched on, and I braced myself for another lecture. But to my surprise, she nodded. Very well. I will attempt to prepare a human meal. That should have been my first warning. Z might have been a genius when it came to organization and efficiency, but cooking? That was clearly outside her programming. What followed was a culinary disaster of epic proportions. She started by scanning my pantry, muttering calculations about caloric intake and nutrient balance. Then she began combining ingredients with the enthusiasm of a mad scientist and the precision of a surgeon. The result was a dish that defied logic, and probably several laws of physics. The food glowed faintly, much like her cubes, and emitted a scent that was equal parts intriguing and alarming. Is it supposed to smell like that? I asked, poking at the plate with my fork. It is optimized for flavor and nutrition, she said, watching me intently. Consume it. I took a cautious bite, immediately regretting my life choices. The taste wasn't bad, exactly, it was just overwhelming. Every flavor imaginable seemed to hit my tongue at once, leaving me both impressed and mildly traumatized. Well? Z asked, her tone unusually eager. It's unique, I said diplomatically, forcing another bite. But maybe next time, we stick to something simpler. Her sensors dimmed slightly, a flicker of what I could only describe as disappointment crossing her face. I will adjust my approach. Hey, I said, setting my fork down. It's not about getting it perfect. Sometimes the effort is what matters. Her head tilted, her sensors blinking softly. Effort is an inefficient metric. Results are what matter. Not always, I said, leaning back in my chair. Sometimes trying is enough. It shows you care. Her sensors flickered again, and I could almost see the gears turning in her head. Human relationships are illogical. Maybe, I admitted. But they're also what make life worth living. For a moment, she didn't respond. Then she stood, her movements unusually hesitant. I will clean up. I watched her go, a strange mix of frustration and admiration swirling in my chest. She might have been the most exasperating companion I'd ever had, but there was something about her, something beneath the sarcasm and efficiency, that intrigued me. As she cleared the table, I found myself wondering what it would take to truly understand her. She was more than just a machine, that much was clear. But what else was she? And why did I care so much? That thought lingered as I sat there, staring at the remains of our meal. For all her quirks and flaws, Z was starting to feel less like an assignment and more like something else. Something I couldn't quite put into words. And that was both terrifying and exhilarating. I should have known things wouldn't stay quiet for long. Z's determination to improve my life had already proven to be a roller coaster of chaos, but that night she outdid herself. It started innocently enough, a low hum coming from the bathroom. At first I thought it was just the cleansing pod rebooting itself after its earlier mishap. Then the hum grew louder, morphing into a deep, rhythmic vibration that rattled the walls. I rushed to investigate, only to find Z standing in the middle of the bathroom, surrounded by what looked like holographic blueprints. She turned to me as I entered, her sensors glowing with what I could only describe as robotic enthusiasm. I have identified the root cause of inefficiency in your hygiene process, she announced. Please tell me you didn't dismantle the cleansing pod, I said, already bracing for the worst. Dismantling was unnecessary, she replied. However, I have enhanced its functionality. Before I could respond, she gestured toward the pod, which now looked like something out of a sci-fi horror movie. Wires and tubes snaked across its surface, pulsating with an unsettling glow. What did you do to it? I asked, my voice climbing an octave. I upgraded it, she said, as though it were the most obvious thing in the world. Its previous design was suboptimal. The new configuration is 47% more effective. Effective at what? Terrifying me? She tilted her head, clearly unamused by my sarcasm. Effective at cleansing, of course. The pod is now equipped with enhanced sensors, automated exfoliation protocols, and an optional aromatherapy feature. I stared at her, half impressed and half horrified. Z, you turned my shower into a death trap. Your hyperbolic assessment is inaccurate, she said, her tone clipped. The system is entirely safe. I wasn't convinced, but before I could argue further, the pod sprang to life. Jets of steam hissed from its vents, and the room filled with a cloying scent that I could only describe as alien citrus. Z gestured toward the pod with a flourish. Would you like a demonstration? No, I said quickly. Absolutely not. Ignoring me, she stepped forward, pressing a series of buttons on the control panel. The pod's door slid open with a hiss, revealing an interior that glowed ominously. Enter, she instructed. I took a step back, raising my hands defensively. There's no way I'm getting in that thing. Your reluctance is illogical, she said, her sensors narrowing in what I could only interpret as robotic irritation. The enhancements are designed to improve your experience. Yeah, well, I'll take my chances with the old version, thanks. She stared at me for a long moment, her sensors blinking rapidly. Then, without warning, she stepped into the pod herself. What are you doing? I asked, alarmed. Demonstrating its functionality, she said, her voice muffled as the door slid shut behind her. I watched in disbelief as the pod hummed to life, its interior lighting up with a series of flashing colors. Jets of mist sprayed in every direction, and the room filled with a strange, melodic chime. For a moment, everything seemed fine. Then the pod began to shake. Z? I called out, my voice tinged with panic. The shaking grew more violent, and a loud clang echoed through the bathroom. I rushed to the control panel, frantically pressing buttons in an attempt to shut the pod down. What's happening in there? I shouted. The system is undergoing recalibration, Z replied, her tone eerily calm despite the chaos. Recalibration? It looks like it's about to explode. Your concern is unwarranted, she said, though her sensors flickered faintly as if she wasn't entirely sure. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the pod powered down. The door slid open with a hiss, and Z stepped out, her metallic frame gleaming from the mist. The enhancements are functioning as intended, she announced, as though nothing had happened. I stared at her, my jaw hanging open. Z, that thing nearly took down the entire bathroom. Your perception is skewed, she replied, brushing a stray wire from her shoulder. The pod performed within acceptable parameters. I ran a hand through my hair, equal parts exasperated and impressed. You know, for someone so obsessed with efficiency, you sure have a knack for making things ridiculously complicated. She tilted her head, her sensors flickering. Human processes are inherently inefficient. My adjustments are necessary to compensate. Yeah, well, maybe some things don't need to be compensated for, I muttered. Her sensors dimmed slightly, a flicker of something almost like hesitation crossing her face. Are you suggesting my efforts are unwelcome? I sighed, my frustration melting into something softer. No, Z. I appreciate what you're trying to do. But sometimes less is more, you know. Her head tilted again, and for a moment I thought she might argue. But instead, she nodded. I will attempt to incorporate your feedback. Thank you, I said, a small smile tugging at the corners of my mouth. As I turned to leave, she spoke again, her voice unusually soft. You are difficult to understand. I paused, glancing back at her. Welcome to being human. For the first time, I thought I saw something resembling a smile in her expression, or at least the closest thing a robotic housekeeper could manage. And despite everything, I couldn't help but laugh. Life with Z was unpredictable, chaotic, and downright exhausting. But it was also, in its own strange way, kind of wonderful.